afternoon. It is Monday, March 26th and 3 o'clock. I'm Molly O'Brien. Thank you so much for joining us here in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center on GoLocal Live. I'd like to start out by saying hello and welcoming our first guest. Karen Kraus is an author and she's an award-winning sports writer for the New York Times. Karen, thank you so much for joining us via Skype today.
It is my pleasure. I appreciate you having me on.
So I'm very excited to be speaking with you today about your first book. It is Norwich, One Tiny Vermont's Town, Secret to Happiness and Excellence. It's published by Simon & Schuster, so we're very happy to be speaking with you about this today. You returned back stateside not too long ago after covering the Winter Olympic Games in Pyeongchang as well, and you released this book just before the Winter Games. And you went to Norwich to find out the secret to this town's success. There are only about 3,000 residents living in this small Vermont town, Norwich, but somehow they seem to mass produce elite athletes, sending an athlete, a participant to the Winter Games, nearly at least one for the past 30 years. Can you talk to us about how you came about this town and this story?
Well, I have to profess that they did not have an Olympian at this game. So they have now had one U.S. Olympian at every games but two in the winter. So it's still a remarkable achievement for a town that's so small. And that's what drew me to it originally. Like, how did this town become such an unlikely Olympic pipeline? But what I found once I got there, Molly, was so heartening because this is a place that does not set out to create or develop Olympians. It's almost as if they develop these Olympians by accident. What they look at when they introduce their children to a wide array of sports is all the intrinsic benefits that you can get from sports, the life lessons, the lifelong friendships. And it's almost as if the relationship building is more important than the championship building. The championships come almost as icing on the cake for what the town is really trying to achieve through sports. And I was really heartened by that because I was an athlete through college, never made an Olympic team, never made a national team, was a walk-on, so I didn't even earn a college scholarship. And so in the zero-sum game that sports have become, even at the youth level in our society, you would look at the arc of my career and say, wow, what a failure she was. And I could not disagree more vehemently. I just am so thankful for all the intrinsic benefits I got from sports. And I've wondered, is that being lost? And in Norwich, I found a town that's still really hews to those values, but also manages to achieve a level of excellence that frankly is mind-boggling.
This is, I mean, it's an iconic story. It's a fascinating story. And what's interesting is I'm curious if this is the story that you initially set out to do in the first
No.
place, or if you just kind of stumbled upon the youth sports and the youth culture and really more about the town. If this is what you set out to do, or if it just turned into something else.
It turned into something bigger and so much
Yeah.
more beautiful than I set out to do because I I've covered sports for 30 years as a journalist, and I've seen over that time just an increasing emphasis put on the results and the bottom line and the idea that second place is the first loser. And because of my background, I just did not feel in sync with that movement at all. And I've really been a bit disillusioned by it because there's so many benefits to sports. And if you project that only the winners gain anything, well, what is really the broader purpose for competing or participating in sports at all? So in this town, I found all of my own value systems reflected. But not only that, I thought I was writing a sports story. That's what I set out to do. And what I realized really early on is that I was really writing a parenting guide masquerading as an Olympic story.
Absolutely fascinating, and it's beautifully done as well. So, congratulations to you on your first book.
Thank you.
Let's talk a little bit about how you went about writing the story itself. You didn't just do a few interviews here and there, you actually embedded yourself within the town of Norwich. Talk to us about how you went about writing the story.
So imagine I arrive in Norwich, in Vermont, a state I had never before set foot in, and all the local populace knows of me is that I grew up in California and am now a city slicker from the New York Times. I knew that I was not going to inspire confidence with that resume. So I moved to Vermont for 5 months and just embedded myself, as you said, in the community so that people could get to know me and my story. There, every day that I was there, I probably met with at least 5 people, and not just to say hello, but I would really pick their brains and grill them. How did you wind up here? What do you like about the town? What does it have that other places you've lived lack or doesn't have? And so I really got a greater sense of the town through all these conversations. But just as importantly, the townspeople got to know me a little better, and that enabled them to feel more comfortable telling their stories to me. But it was funny, Molly, because maybe two of the most popular Olympians are the ski jumpers, Mike Holland and Jeff Hastings, just because they've left such a huge footprint on the community. Not only were they arguably the two best ski jumpers the United States has ever produced, but they also have continued throughout the years to teach ski jumping to generations of kids. They are very active with the local high school ski jumping team. So they're really well known and highly regarded and beloved in the community. And yet, when I sat down with each of them separately, they looked at me quizzically when I said I wanted to write a book about their exploits and the success of the town. And each of them, without knowing what the other had told me, said, well, I'm happy to help you with this book, but I don't think you're going to get more than 1 or 2 pages on my story. They just don't see themselves as a big deal. And to me, that was part of the reason for the success of this town is that instead of holding the elite performers up above everyone else, but putting them on a pedestal, these people are completely integrated into the community. They see themselves as no better, no worse than anyone else. They look at themselves as ordinary people who, for a few years in their lives, were part of an extraordinary journey.
It's absolutely fascinating, and like you said, really becoming a part of that community and communal in a way.
Yeah.
And this town, Karen, seems to have become a pipeline for Olympic athletes and successful ones, but not maybe the way, like you've said, our obsessive sports culture could have imagined. Can you talk about some of the keys that this town has produced for continued success?
Sure. Well, volunteerism is at the root of everything. That there's this feeling in the town, and it's unspoken. It's almost as if it's passed on from generation to generation through osmosis, that every person has some resource, whether it's time, expertise, money, that they can pass on to others. So there's the sense that not only is it something that you should do, but you should not think twice about in your day to day life, in some way reaching out to make someone else's life brighter, better. It can be something as easy as many of the grown-ups will go to the local public grade school and read at lunch to the kids as they eat their lunches. Or it can be something grander, paying for kids their rec league fees so that they can participate in these no-cut sports. And that's a big part of it too. They do not cut in any of their leagues. But there's just this sense that we're all in this together, that my child does not have to succeed at the expense of your child, that everyone is better when people are working together and all pulling in the same direction. And I found that really heartening. It also reminded me of my childhood in Santa Clara in the 1970s. Now, if you look at Norwich and Santa Clara now, the two cities appear to have little in common. But when I was growing up in Santa Clara, it was still largely agrarian. There were orchards still all over, and it was considered America's fruit basket. And so there was this sense that a communitarian spirit that I think the Silicon Valley revolution has all but squashed. You know, they're all about disrupting, getting in fast, getting what you want, and moving on. And I think what defines Norwich is this sense that no, we're really all in this together. And so, all for one, one for all. I'm going to root for your child as much as I root for my child, because it's really just about the journey and the relationships and not so much about the results. And I think that because of the way these kids are raised, because they are very much a part of the community along every step of the way, the community is there to pick them up when they fall or fail. There's this large social safety net that helps the kids while they're competing, but then allows them to integrate more easily and fully back into the community when their sports careers are over. And that's the piece of it, Molly, that I so often see going missing with a lot of the high level athletes that I cover, that in their quest to be the best, to win these gold medals and set these world records, they're almost isolated from the community that they are very much of, but not in. And as a result, once they're done, they really don't have that social safety net to welcome them back and to pick them up as they try to figure out what their next act is, to embrace them as they contemplate their futures.
I think that's so critical. The way that you compare that is that these people, as they work their way through in Norwich, being celebrated, being embraced, being part of the community, not being elevated one way or another, and when they go to compete and then they're embraced back within the community and have those social skills, whereas in other places in the country they really don't have those social skills to be integrated back within the community, and we oftentimes see elite athletes struggle. They burn out,
Right.
they crash and burn, whether that's an elite athlete in any other sport or they're in a major league, or they oftentimes you see tragic stories where they just people don't have the skills because they weren't set up for success later on in life because they only had this elite sport to compete in. Those were the only skills they were taught. So it's fascinating to see you tell that and weave that into the story as well. So,
Yes, and I think you bring up a good point, is that if you are only seen as an athlete, if you are only
mm-hmm.
feted or celebrated as the sum total of your successes,
Yeah.
that's what your identity becomes. You see yourself as an athlete. I compete, I win, therefore I am. So, what happens when that competition piece is taken away? The athlete loses his or her self identity. And that's where the anxiety, depression, and problems really begin.
Which is devastating. Uh, do you think that this I mean it's not really a concept, it is
Mm,
happening. So I
yeah.
I don't necessarily want to say concept, but we'll just use that terminology. Do you think the Norwich way of life, not necessarily concept, but do you think the Norwich way can thrive and can happen in any community here in America? And if so, how do we make that happen?
Well, I think it requires a subtle shift in our value system, away from really valuing the end results and instead looking at sports as, yes, there are benefits to be gained, some extrinsic benefits, college scholarships, Olympic berths, maybe even a pro careers. But more importantly, there are life lessons that can be learned through sports. self-discipline, delayed gratification, resilience, perseverance, being coachable, being a team person. These are all valuable qualities that you can take with you into the real world that can be learned through sports. Lifelong friendships, just really taking the emphasis on the end results and putting it back on having fun, enjoying the process, mastering skills, self-improvement, relationship building. So that's the first thing. I was kind of chuckling because I went to the Olympics in Pyeongchang, and of course, the nation that just dominated those games was Norway with 59 medals. Well, Norway, Molly, is the Norwich of countries. They really value with their youngsters just introducing sports, putting them all in the same age. They train alongside kids the same age, regardless of the talent level. And their philosophy is, we don't even want to publicize results of kids that are 10, 12, 8. You will never see a story published in Norway on the best 10-year-old alpine skier. Their philosophy is, let's make the sport fun in the beginning, get the kids hooked on the activity, allow them to develop some mastery, and then when they become teens, if they want to become serious, fine. They want the children's best years to come between the years of 17 and 27. Whereas we have a model right now in our society at large where the model is from 7 to 17, and a lot of kids don't even make it to 17 because they're so burned out. And so I think we just need to shift the philosophy a little. It takes coaches and parents that are willing to do that and be on the same page. I think the kids, if left to their own devices, this is where they would gravitate. If you watch kids who start pickup games, they will actually, and there have been studies done to verify this or corroborate this, they will actually bend the rules so that the game can continue longer. They're not as attuned to the results until they get that kind of feedback from the parents in their midst.
Exactly, a little rule bending. Always lots of be fun to be having those pickup games, and again, crucial skills that you can learn from playing sports: leadership, team building, humbleness.
Exactly. Humility, absolutely.
Exactly. So always wonderful lessons to be learned, whether win or loss. I think there's a lot to be learned from losing as well.
Yeah.
Karen Krause, I want to say thank you. Before we let you go, you have been following and continue to storytell on Tiger Woods' run at the Masters, and something to be said about the Norwich way of life and Tiger Woods. I want to ask you what it's been like to write about Tiger Woods coming back and making that run at the Masters with the Norwich way of life in mind, maybe.
Right. Well, he was definitely not raised the way they are in Norwich. And I was reminded of that. I read a fabulous book that's just coming out this week on Tiger called Tiger Woods, by Armin Kettian and Jeff Benedict. And they have this telling anecdote. They talked to his kindergarten teacher who remembered that Tiger approached her and said, "Could you ask my dad if I could play soccer?" And here was the deal. Tiger's dad, Earl, would not let him do any other sports.
Wow.
He was to play golf because Earl had this grandiose vision for his son that Tiger amazingly has been able to fulfill, but there was a price to be paid along the way. And what I've found gratifying about watching Tiger so far this year, and of course it's quite early in his comeback still, but he really seems to be appreciating the sport for just the small things, for just being able to pull off a great shot. He's interacting more with the fans. He just appears to be enjoying the process and the journey, whereas for decades and decades, he was solely focused on the results. I remember his ex-wife, Elin, when they were still married, a story where after a victory, she asked, "Well, should I plan a party?" And he said, "No, Elin, this is what I'm supposed to be doing."
Wow.
And so it's that singularly focused, just, almost obsession with the results that I think really hurt him, his overall development as a person. And so I'm really happy to see him back out here and see fans really celebrating him. And I hope that he is able to continue to enjoy it. I was really glad to hear him say a couple weeks ago that, hey, I'm not looking to win. From where I came in October, I'm happy just to be out here. And I think if he can maintain um, that attitude, it will serve him really well. And the results will probably end up coming as just as a matter of course. But I think he'll be a happier human being along the way.
Most definitely. Well, Karen Kraus, award-winning sports writer with the New York Times. Her book is Norwich, One Tiny Vermont's Town, Secret to Happiness and Excellent. Karen, it's been so wonderful speaking with you today. What a true pleasure. If you get a chance, follow Karen on Twitter, read her work, and go out and pick up a copy of the book. Karen, I do appreciate it. A little bit of a sports book, but like you said, kind of a parenting guide as well.
And a real antidote to all of the stuff that's dividing our country at the moment.
If you do say so. I'd like to thank Karen Kraus for joining us here on Go Local Live. We're going to take a quick pause to get set up for our next guest. Hang with us. Everyone, thanks for joining us here on Go Local Live at the Navigate Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm Molly O'Brien. I'm joined by our friend Shira Hirschberg. She's a registered dietitian nutritionist with All Foods Nutrition. Shira, welcome back.
Thank you. Good
How
to
are
be here.
you doing?
Doing great.
You have a new family member.
I do.
Everyone's happy and healthy?
Everyone is. Yep. 5 months old.
Oh, wow, that went by fast.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations to you. We're happy to have you back here in studio. We are going to talk a little bit about women's health and nutrition. March is National Nutrition Month. It's also Women's History Month, so we decided to just kind of mash them all together, right?
Combine it up.
So we're going to talk a little bit about weight and menopause. Why did you decide to pick this topic for us today?
So I chose this topic because it's a question I'm getting asked about frequently. A lot of people want to know why managing their weight is so hard as they get to be in their middle and older age and around the time of menopause. So it's a question that I didn't get specific information about in school, and so I decided it was a good independent research topic for me in my private practice.
Okay, that's good. And really interesting. I think probably it's something that a lot of women go through and are interested in, and obviously coming to you as a nutritionist, people want to know why this is happening to their bodies. Okay, so let's dig in. Does menopause cause weight gain? This is probably a question that you get a lot.
It is. I would love to say yes, because it's nice to have an answer. Sadly, the answer is no.
Okay, not always so cut and dry.
What we know from the research now is that it's age, not menopause, that causes the weight gain. So most people, as they hit a certain age, start to gain about a pound a year. Which adds up over time.
That does.
And men do the same thing. So therefore, that's one of the reasons they say it's not the hormones. And they've looked into a lot of the little details as well, but that's one of the things they speak to, is that everybody goes through this weight gain. There are some differences with menopause and where you gain the weight.
Oh, okay.
And body composition.
So how does that work?
As you hit around the menopausal period, often people will go from depositing weight lower on their bodies to higher on their bodies. So from more of a hip, butt type of fat distribution to more upper body, abdominal area. And that type of fat, specifically when it's funny, most people will poke their stomach and they feel like that's their fat. That's not the dangerous kind.
Oh.
The soft stuff right under your finger is less dangerous than the stuff that's actually between your organs and your outer wall, your outer musculature.
Oh.
So,
but that belly fat, that's what can be dangerous though, right?
The deeper belly fat is the most dangerous. It's the visceral belly fat, so the stuff that's around your organs specifically, not the right at the level surface.
Okay, so when you're grabbing onto your
it's not the most dangerous type. It's the deeper, harder stuff that's really deep in your body around your organs. That's the most dangerous for your health.
Okay,
in terms of heart disease, diabetes, cancer, risks of those chronic diseases.
Okay, so what do we need to be concerned about? So as we get older, so you can't necessarily link menopause, weight gain. You can't really necessarily link that, but kind of as you're getting older, the weight can start to add up. Therefore, health risks can kind of sink in.
Yeah, people who are at higher weights have higher risks for a lot of chronic diseases, especially type 2 diabetes, heart disease, those sorts of things, and especially that specific type of fat that we're talking about.
Okay.
Increase your risk for those things. So people tend to see things first like higher cholesterol, blood pressure, waist circumference. That's the stuff that's telling you your risk for heart disease is going up.
Okay, so why do women start to see weight gain specifically around this time? Can we just blame it on age, or why is it women specifically more so than men, I suppose?
When they look at people around menopause, actually, it seems like there's something about that change that decreases the activity level of women. So I don't know, menopause makes you tired. That's basically what they say is that women move less around that time of life. And so it's about 200 calories a day less of active time.
Oh, okay.
So that doesn't mean you're at the gym huffing and puffing. It means any sort of activity. It might be gardening, it might be walking, activities of daily living, as well as, structured exercise.
Okay, so if you are starting to go through that change, does that mean you need to pick up your activity level if you're concerned about health risks or weight gain or that kind of thing?
Yeah, so basically, certainly some people will eat less food. You can eat 200 less calories a day, but in terms of what the research shows us, it's most protective to exercise, be active more. The people that seem to gain the least weight and prevent obesity versus overweight, right, there's just a BMI cutoff there, but people who gain less weight tend to be the most active people. So when they look at people who really didn't gain a lot of weight, it was people who exercised about an hour a day.
Oh, wow. And that can be difficult if you are not feeling well or you're getting older. Other things start to creep in around that time too. Arthritis, pain, that kind of thing.
So finding ways to be more active within whatever limitations you have. And I'm not talking about, running for 1 hour. I'm talking about fast walking, something that gets your heart rate up a little, maybe not easy to have this conversation through. You can feel your heart rate rising, but not flat out running.
Okay, all right. So we talked a little bit about maybe eating less, which isn't necessarily the best choice unless, you eat a lot.
And most people don't want to do that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
The amount, like I said, 200 calories isn't huge, so I kind of created one example of that. Let's talk about breakfast, 200 calories for breakfast. Let's say you have 2 pieces of toast, 2 eggs, and a glass of orange juice, a small one, 8 ounces. To take 200 calories out of that, you replace the toast with an English muffin.
Okay.
And you take out the orange juice and have unsweetened tea or water or something like that.
Okay.
That's a 200 calorie difference in your day.
Okay. Or maybe you don't have ice cream for dessert.
There's that, if you have ice cream. But a lot of people are like already eating quite healthy. They're already working really hard. They don't have changes like that to make.
Yeah. So eating less could be one thing. We talked a little bit about increasing activity. What else?
Yeah.
What other options are there?
So one of the things that was interesting is that I'm doing, so the basis of the beginning of this research, and we can talk more about this if you want, came from kind of the big review studies. So when you're trying to get a handle on a new topic, typically you look at review articles that take all of the research up to that point and summarize it, and often compare studies. They have detailed analyses, but point being, there's a ton of articles together into this one paper. And so I looked at all of those kind of big reviews. And that's where I found the stuff about exercise, the stuff we've talked about so far. Then I started to look at, okay, that's up to 2011 and 2014. What are the most recent studies? And I found a couple that were interesting. They talk about interventions. Okay, so how do we help people who are in this period, 40-something? One of the studies was specifically about Australian women in their 40s, because that's right before they're in that period. They took women 44 to 50 before menopause. How do we prevent this? And so, there's 2 studies basically that have looked at this so far. One of them looked at these women in Australia, and one looked at people in a more in-depth intervention. So this one, there's one that was about 15 visits a year. Now that's a lot, right? So 15 meetings to talk about nutrition and physical activity. This Australian study said, can we get the same results, but can we require less of our participants? And they said Australian government will cover 5 visits a year with health providers like exercise scientists, dietitians. So let's work with those 5 and see what we can get.
Now we want to scoot over. Okay.
So they worked with those 5. And they sent them to people actually quite like me.
Okay.
So they sent them to people who have a motivational interviewing background, and that was just, people who were like a registered dietitian but with some training in motivational interviewing. It's a counseling style. And they said 5 visits with those a year. They did 1 exercise science visit and 4 dietitian visits. What happens to those people? And the good news is that they lost more weight than the group that just were handed a bunch of educational materials and measured. The interesting thing is that people who were overweight, actually, it didn't matter which group they were in. Any intervention helped those people. Maybe they were more aware, they were already more concerned, and any little tip would help them. So like I said, 2 studies, not a ton of data.
Wow.
But it does seem to be that visiting healthcare providers, specifically around this issue, can help. Dietitians, exercise scientists, people can make a difference in terms of preventing the weight gain that tends to happen at this age period.
But if you were already overweight, it didn't seem to help at all either way?
Both helped. Education only, so just like saying, here's a bunch of paperwork and we measured your BMI and this is what it means and you should do these things, that did the same as coming to visit somebody.
Interesting.
But for people who were not overweight, that wasn't the case. It was important that they go see somebody to get the motivation to be making these lifestyle changes before they had a problem.
Okay. So
I love a good prevention message.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's kind of healthcare.
Right.
That's a whole nother conversation.
Mostly we treat people who are already having that problem, but there is good data for prevention on this issue.
On this issue, prevention is a great place to start. So that's why we're having this conversation, I suppose, right? Why not? So learning about this message, I mean, we talk about this all the time with nutrition. It's eating healthy, it's exercising, it's providing balance in your life. So doing it now, if you set up those tools right now for yourself, if you get in a pattern of healthy eating, hopefully you can just continue that out through your whole life, right?
That's the idea. And the people in some of these studies they looked at that didn't gain that weight in middle age were the people who started out early exercising a lot and then kept going their whole entire life. So
rather than having to start at that time.
Right. Rather than saying, wow, I'm gaining a bunch of weight, I'm 50 years old, maybe I should start exercising now, it's just harder at that point for them. It's easier if you've started early and kept it going. And so you're most likely to be successful with maintaining a lower weight if you do it that way.
No kidding. So let's talk a little bit about, what else do we have? I feel like we've covered a lot of this.
The only thing, if we want to talk a little bit more about research.
Okay, yes. All right. So those are a couple studies that you went over. Yep. We talk a little bit about fake news, which is always kind of interesting when you're in the news field. But when you were digging into research, what I always think is fun in medicine is the amount of misinformation that's out there, which can be very tricky, very confusing when you're a patient looking to find out what's going on with you and what's going on with your body. But when people come to you and are trying to figure out, like, hey, what's going on with my body, as a dietitian nutritionist, people are coming to you, that has to be overwhelming. Plus, when you're looking at research, trying to figure out what you want to talk about, I can imagine there's probably false information out there as well. And you thought this was interesting and also kind of fun because, like you said, you're kind of a research nerd.
I am. I'm such a research nerd. So I talked a little bit about how I did this, right? Looked at these big review articles, and I use Google Scholar if I want to use Google, but often you don't get a lot of great access there. I work at URI, so I use their library to find articles. They need to be peer-reviewed articles. That's part of the point here. But also I want to talk a little bit about what happens if you were just to enter this question into Google, right?
Yeah.
Because sadly, you don't get a lot of good information there. But how do you figure out what's the better information versus the worst? So I want to talk a little bit about how to figure that out if you're an individual trying to answer a question on the internet. So first thing to look at is who's responsible for the website. Is it staffed by qualified professionals? What are the people's credentials, who wrote this article? If it's something about nutrition, hopefully there's a dietitian or someone with a PhD in nutrition or a doctor, somebody that has some medical credential. When was the site last updated? Nutrition science is changing all the time, so it needs to be recent. If it says updated in 2000, you might not be getting any good information.
I think that's so important because you can look at stuff online all the time, and if it says something from 2002, it's probably not relevant.
16 years. Yeah, that's been a long time.
And if that's the last time it was updated, then those people probably aren't qualified.
No one's paying attention to those
exactly
to the updated information. Where's the information coming from? So what type of website is it? This isn't a fix-all, but web addresses that end in .edu, .org, .gov are typically a little more reputable than those that end in .com because the .com ones are typically trying to sell something. So if you look at what's behind the article, so if they mention a supplement in the article that's a fix, does that website also sell that supplement? That just tells you there's a bias. They're going to want that to be positive. So you just have to make sure there's no, kind of hidden agenda that you can pretty easily suss out. And then why is the site giving you this information? Is it public service? Is it from the Mayo Clinic? Is it from NIH? Is it from, cancer.gov or cancer.org, diabetes.org? Those are big reputable organizations. They don't really have a hidden agenda there, so their information is not going to be as biased. And things to look out for, red flags, junk science we call them.
Okay, I like junk science.
Quick fixes. Sorry, we don't have good ones. Dire warnings of danger, right? If it sounds too good to be true, if it fixes a whole multitude of conditions, it usually doesn't. There's not usually good evidence for that. Maybe it does magically, but we're not going to really know that. So they're probably making it up. Recommendations based on a single study. So that's why I was clear, like this N stuff we just talked about, 2 studies, right? You need to make sure you understand how much evidence is behind something. Lists of good and bad foods. Certainly there are diets that have things that you should avoid and things that you need to include, but if it says these are good, these are bad, it's a sign that it's not as reputable. Again, anything that's being sold, you'd have to be really careful with that. And then articles from studies that were published without a peer review. So you need to make sure that peer review is included. If they say, I conducted a study, you can't do that. You need to then have a peer review process. There's this whole scientific way to maintain scientific integrity. So those are some of the things to be aware of.
I think that's so great that you talked about this and want to talk about it because there are people out there that tend to prey on people looking for medical advice and take advantage of those who are either sick or looking for help with medical needs. And if you are not feeling well or if you have an illness, then you want anything and everything, right? If there's something going on with you or your body or a loved one, you are going to do anything for advice, for help, and the internet can be a dangerous place. So Shira just provided you for some tips. If you are entering Google, hopefully that helped a little bit.
And if you're looking for nutrition advice, eatrightri.org has a list of registered dietitians by city and town, so you can find somebody near you if you want information that is at least grounded in that education.
That's great. That's great. Thank you so much, Cher Hirschberg. We're happy to have you back here on GoLocal Live. Her organization is All Foods Nutrition, a reputable site. There.
DoesEndin.com. I'm selling Meeting with Me.
No
products.
Selling a business. All right. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to take a quick pause to get ready for our next guest here on GoLocal Live.
Thanks, Molly.
Awesome. Hey everyone, thanks for joining me here in the Navigate Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm Molly O'Brien. I'd like to say hello and welcome our next guest, Aya Josiah Fidawar. Hello, Josiah.
Hello. How
Aya
are you?
Josiah, how are you?
I'm doing well, Molly.
He is the executive director of Millennial RI. We're talking about Choose RI event happening this Thursday, but we're going to talk a little bit more. Millennial RI has been very active over the past couple years and continuing to grow and expand here in Rhode Island. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that. I believe this is the first time in our studio, so
Yes.
welcome.
Hey, how are you? First time I've been here, but our president, Travis Escobar, has been here before, and so we're just glad to get more of us out here, and thanks for inviting us back.
I know. I'm super excited to have you in here today. Let's talk a little bit about why millennials are important to Rhode Island, so much to start an organization around it.
Yeah, I mean, some of it's just the numbers. There are currently 256,000 millennials in Rhode Island, so that's a fourth of our population. So from a business perspective, that's a large amount of your potential consumers. As a potential employer, that's a large amount of people that you might want to hire. And to the employment piece, we are currently 43.5% of the Rhode Island workforce.
Wow.
So when you're talking about things and trends and paid sick leave and other issues that are coming up in the workplace, the millennial perspective is an important one, given that we are about half of the workforce. And I think the thing that was most, kind of galvanizing was 70% of college graduates leave Rhode Island after graduation. Can you guess how many other states are not as good as that as we are?
No.
Only 2.
Wow.
Delaware and Vermont. Nothing against Delaware and Vermont. Those are great places, I'm sure, to go.
Wow.
But you would think that Rhode Island would be a little bit more of an appealing place for a college graduate to choose to stay. But we're not enough is happening to keep us here. So
That's
we
shocking.
it is pretty shocking. It's very shocking. And so that's why we came together to say, let's go ahead and address this brain drain. Let's keep more of these millennials here engaging in our economy, staying and becoming part of our workforce, and supporting Rhode Island.
Let's talk a little bit about that. Do you believe that millennials are the key to the local economy, to boosting it, to making Rhode Island thrive again?
I mean, I wouldn't say we're the only key. I mean, I think it's, not necessarily a silver bullet thing. I think we're an important piece to the entire puzzle. I mean, we're energetic and ready to prove ourselves, to prove that we're not just about taking selfies and, getting on our social media. That's an important part of our lived experience, and I think it can be used, in a very productive way. But I think that it's really about just figuring out how to get millennials to do whatever our part is. When we see things like, I'm forgetting her name right now, but the business that Benny's, right, closing down, and seeing that, hey, more millennials could have shopped there. We're constantly trying to say, how do we, although Amazon is a great, easy way to get a lot of things we need and don't need, how can we just tell other millennials in Rhode Island to say, rather than spend your dollars there, let's spend them locally. If we had been engaged and together around when that was happening, if that was one of the biggest problems, that could have been something that we would have been excited to, as Millennial Rhode Island, to get in front of and get a lot of millennials to do our best to support this business. So now we're really trying to get out and say to local businesses, we're here. Before you start facing any problems, just so you know that we're a strong force that's willing to patronize locally and to show that we really want to keep these businesses here.
Well, it's not necessarily even about, it's about that, keeping businesses here, but millennials are starting new businesses in Rhode Island, incorporating new businesses, and then continuing to support those businesses as well. So talk about how that's an important aspect as well. So keeping this age group of people here, millennials, in Rhode Island, keeping them to stay, and then opening up businesses, and then supporting those businesses as well.
I mean, our best example really is Airbnb, right? These are RISD graduates who came up with this idea and then realized that the market that would be best for them to go ahead and try to grow it wasn't here. And they had a great idea when they were here, but they had the resources and the environment that was Silicon Valley. We could really be creating the opportunity for incubation of businesses here in Rhode Island. We do have a lot of businesses that have started to do that. A lot of resources, whether it's from Commerce Rhode Island or just the city of Providence, there's a lot of efforts coming towards supporting small businesses, and we just really need to capitalize on that. I mean, we are, especially here in Providence, the creative capital, right? We should really try and double down on that to become one of the centers. We may not be the next Silicon Valley, but we don't know what our potential best addition to the startup economy is. I think, one, we're small enough. If you want to try something, this is a great economy to see if it works in, to get the word around and to really, go ahead and, have your beginnings here. And we really hope to emphasize and build on that in Rhode Island.
And who knows what the potential is if that many people are leaving.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The potential could be endless. We just need people to stay. Let's talk a little bit about your efforts to continue to keep people here and to support millennials within Rhode Island. So I think this is so fun, and I need to come to one of these. I'm going to have you scoot over a little bit. In 2018, Millennial RI debuted Adulting 101 series. These look so fun, and some of the topics are just super relevant. So relevant. Talk to us a little bit about Adulting 101.
So the idea kind of came from just thinking about all the adult things that we're trying to figure out now that we're adults and supposed to have already understood this. I'm supposed to have a savings, but how do I save?
Don't ask me. Ask him.
Well, I'm still learning too. I go to these events, right, because we're hosting, and I'm also the one taking notes and learning myself. But I mean, I think the reality is that we have chosen to put these events where it's serious, topics, and not that all aren't serious, but financial well-being topics, from home ownership to how to manage a budget to how to invest, but also covering topics that are just important to our generation, conversation we're starting to have. So the Center for Sexual Health and Pleasure in Pawtucket is hosting a healthy relationships and consent conversation, because that's a big thing with the Me Too movement and just generally coming to a place where we acknowledge that we have to start addressing some of these societal issues and start having conversations about them. And we have plans to do things from how to grow your business to just how to get more engaged in the state. We had an event with Common Cause Rhode Island, how to effectively engage your voice around legislation. So we really try to address the things that are professionally important, financially crucial, but also just societally important, and just give you a hour and 30 minutes of an introduction to this Adulting 101 topic.
I think it's so cool. And this is happening how often?
So we, as of now, and it's going to sound crazy because it is a little crazy, we have an event scheduled every Thursday of the month until about June and July. And these are still getting figured out too. So look at millennialri.com/events and see what we have going on, and we'll continually put this kind of stuff out on our Facebook and our Instagram and all that, and try to keep them going.
And all that good stuff. Okay. So something else that's really cool is the Millennial RI card, a membership card that will hook you up with discounts. And I think this goes back to reaching out to businesses and letting businesses know that millennials are integral for our community, our state, our economy.
Right, yeah.
Talk to us a little bit about this.
So something we're very excited to be debuting. So that's going to be something at the March 29th, this Thursday, Choose RI event. We're giving members who've already been members their cards, and also members who become members that day will also be getting their cards as well. So it was amazing to see the reception from the business community. So we have this idea of like, hey, if we can get members who pay $30 a year opportunity to, make some of that money back. It's tough as an organization that's aware of how student loan debts make it harder for millennials to like go out there with their money to be asking you for money. But now we're trying to like balance it out. So so many businesses, Need Donuts, Seven Stars Bakery, Frog and Toad Store, Troop PVD, Black Sheep, Brass Monkey, Revival Brewery, Salt Cycle Studios. I don't want to leave anyone up, but the Providence Coal-Fired Pizza. Also, so many businesses were like, listen, we want to see millennials engaging more. We want to see millennials patronizing our business more. We want to just support the millennials here in our state. Sure, we'll offer 10% off any day of the week to millennials. We'll offer 10% off on Mondays, and anything that they've been able to offer, I think millennials everywhere appreciate it. Sometimes just saving that dollar on that one thing, it's enough to really make us proud to be Rhode Islanders and to shop locally, knowing that these businesses really care about us being rooted here. So that's something that's very exciting, and we really hope a lot of folks come around to our annual event for a lot of reasons, but also to get that card before you run out.
I think that's so cool too, because it gives you an opportunity, one, to not only engage with local businesses if you don't already, but then it's a kind of a conversation starter, right? So if you go over to Need Donuts and you show them your card, oh, what's this? Maybe then someone who's working there will be like, oh, that's so cool. I didn't know Millennial RI existed. What is it? And then you can have a conversation about it, right? You're meeting new people, you're talking, you're engaging about the community.
Completely.
It's a conversation starter too, right?
Exactly.
So plus you get 10%, whatever it is,
right.
at whatever business you're at. That's just an example. I think that's cool. Okay, so you mentioned to go get it at the Choose RI event before it runs out. So this is a limited thing?
So it's not limited.
Okay.
So this is the easiest way to get your card, because we are all working our full-time jobs and doing so much. We don't have
this is your full-time gig.
This isn't our full-time gig, so we don't have like a headquarters where you can come and pick up your card. So after this date, whenever someone buys a membership, we're gonna mail it out to you or just ask you how you prefer to pick it up. But this is the easy way to just show up, come to an event, get a drink ticket, enjoy yourself, and get your card right then and there. But we will have membership cards until they run out, and then we'll get more. Okay. So hopefully we won't even have a moment of them completely running out, so everyone can have one.
No, I hope you run out, because that means more people are joining and engaging.
Yes.
All right, so let's talk about this, because who doesn't love a fun party, a celebration? Choose RI event is happening. It's Thursday, right? The 29th at Hotel Providence. This is the 4th year that you've done the Choose RI celebration. Talk to us a little bit about the event and really what it's all about.
Yeah, so we're turning 4 years old, which is huge. We're all young, and as an organization, this is young, right? Sometimes part of it is just seeing this thing that was a vision, a dream, a conversation by our founding members, which is now a real organization and a real force that's a part of the conversation now. So some of it is just saying, look at where we've all, from us as a board to the members who've been with us since day one to just millennials in Rhode Island, like, look at where we are. Folks are talking about our generation and the generation coming up. And this is a lot of progress in just 4 years. Imagine where we have to go. And then we're going to get pretty specific about where we want to go as an organization within the next year. It's funny, there goes a board member, John Conley, being a typical millennial on our phones.
Getting stuff done.
Yeah, exactly, always multitasking. But we're also going to be talking about the things we have planned for this year. So we have the Adulting 101 series. We have the membership card. We have, and I don't want to I should do a little drop. Oh, this is a little preview for the event. But we're also working to get a new roundtable opportunity. So thinking it's going to call it 21 Questions, where you get a chance to sit down with local leaders in Rhode Island. Because it's Rhode Island, you can kind of get connected to people quite quickly. As a person who works for the state, the governor is relatively accessible. Not as accessible as most people, but compared to like Massachusetts, where I'm originally from, you're not going to get a sit down with the governor that easy.
He'll shave his head, but you can't meet with him.
You won't be able to meet that. But we're going to try to institute this series where you get a chance to have a one-on-one conversation with prominent leaders around Rhode Island. And that's going to be an opportunity exclusively for members. So
Love that.
we're trying to do a lot of really cool things, and we really want to just get the membership and the potential members together to know we want you to be with us for 2018 and stick with us throughout, because we have a lot of great things to accomplish here in Rhode Island.
This is a big year, and it takes millennials to do this, because this is really this is who's taking over the state. I remember when Travis was here, he was saying, Rhode Island has an aging population, so it's really up to the millennials to come back, to start these businesses, to take over businesses, and to be a part of the workforce.
Yeah. And what's great is, Generation X, baby boomers, the ones that I've known have been very supportive of saying, you know what, we're ready to go, and we'd love to have you step up. And folks have been mentors and people who've been grooming us as an organization and us as individuals to step up to the plate. So I think that's one thing that I'm very excited about, and that's the amount of energy and support coming from other generations.
Cool. It's been so fun chatting with you here today. I'm very excited. The event is Thursday, March 29th at Hotel Providence. Tickets are on sale. We'll put a link on our website as well. If you're interested in joining Millennial I will put a link to that as well. What is membership for a year?
$30. $30. But again, with that membership card, you can pretty much save or make up that $30 in probably about a week, depending on how you eat. But so you'll make it back. Do
you have to be a millennial to join?
You do not have to be a millennial to do anything that we do.
Okay, so that's interesting enough. So if you fall outside of the millennial category, you can still join.
And we have honorary memberships. Well, not actually, but we do have our members who are like, you're pretty much a millennial.
You classify. You
Yeah.
classify. All right, we're wrapping things up here on GoLocal Live at the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. Business Monday starts here in just a few moments. I'm Molly O'Brien. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time.